Welcome to Mental Health Extra. My name's Mick Coyle. Thanks for checking out the podcast that goes out supplementary to Mental Health Monday. Really interesting show as part of Mental Health Monday this week with Dr. Susie Gage and also Tanya Leary. All the details in the previous episode. But thanks for checking us out today. Normally Jake Mills is with us for this one, but Jake has got all kinds of different events taking place. So we instead are going to focus on a couple of different events which are taking place over the next few days. First and foremost, we're going to touch on an event which is taking place this coming Wednesday at the Halton Stadium in Widnes. All the details on that in a couple of moments. Plus, stand by because I've got all the information you need to know about a 10k and 5k event which is taking place in aid of Papyrus, and it's all in the name as well of Nathan's 10k, and this follows on from a previous edition of Mental Health Monday. But all the information on the way here on Mental Health Extra from Radio City Talk.
Mental Health Monday on Radio City Talk with Mick Coyle.
Radio City Talk.
We're going to hear about an event which is taking place at the Halton Stadium, and it is taking place tomorrow night. We're going to be hosted by Listening Ears Amparo Service, something which actually got a mention on the programme a few weeks ago, supported by the Halton Health Improvement Team, and the CEO of Listening Ear, Richard Brown, joins us in the studio. Richard, thank you for your time. This is the Halton Stadium. Widnes Vikings play there.
Yep.
Some of the women's teams play
Everton
there
and
too.
Liverpool ladies play there.
And you've got an event. It's starting at 7 p.m. tomorrow night, basically. And just tell us what it's about.
Well, we've been providing services for people affected by suicide for 3 years plus now. And after a year or so, we thought it'd be really nice to have a memorial event. There's not really any event for people who've been affected by suicide to come together, share their stories and understand that they're not the only people that are going through the pain that they're currently going through. So we decided to put a memorial event on. Last year was the first one, and we did it at Liverpool Cathedral, and it was a really nice event. We kind of, from that point, we thought, well, people have got to travel all the way from Crewe to come to Liverpool. It doesn't seem fair or right. You know, they're struggling with things in life anyway, and then to make that additional journey. So we decided to do one in Chester Cathedral. Then people would say, could you come and do one with us? And could you do one with us? So we're now in our fourth event. This one is in Halton, so at the Widnes Rugby League and other teams' stadium. And it's just a time for people to come down and talk to each other. It's not too religious. It's chaired by a religious person, but we try and move away from the religious element a little bit because it's not for everyone, the religious element.
I was going to ask you about that, and maybe what have you learnt from hosting these events about what the right type of environment is for people? I know for people, for instance, who've spoken on this programme before, when it's even been the day of funerals of people when suicide has been the cause of death, and actually what they've wanted to do is instead go for a walk up Snowdon and have their moment there, their reflection up there. And I guess you guys are trying to find the right balance, create an environment where everybody can feel comfortable.
Yeah, I mean, when we put the first one on, it seemed, from our point of view, the appropriate place would be to do it in a religious setting. And it was a great event. I mean, first one for us in the Anglican Cathedral. Lovely, lovely, lovely space, lovely event. So we then carried on with that, kind of doing them in cathedrals. But then we thought, well, why don't we try it in a non-religious venue? And so we tried it at St Helens Rugby League ground, and I kind of said at the time, it's like their cathedral, really, because, you know, if you're St Helens people, they love the rugby league. So we thought it kind of appropriate to do it in that venue, and we had a huge take-up of people. So I'm not saying that you shouldn't do them in religious venues, but to do them in non-religious venues, in addition, gives comfort to the people who aren't religious, because a lot of people, when they find they're bereaved by suicide, will question their own religion at times, because they, you know, why has this happened is a continual question that's being asked, and you know that can then go on to questioning their own religion, and that's something for them personally. But from our point of view, we thought, well, we'd mix it up and we'd do some in religious venues and some in non-religious venues. So the blend of the different venues is working quite well, we feel.
Tell us about the service then, because of course emotions are so strong when you talk about the death of any loved one, particularly in the circumstances when suicide has been the factor and the cause of death as well. So how do you strike that balance about reflection but also celebration of life as well?
Okay, well the event, one of the things we've started doing, which came out of the event we did in St Helens, was to have a memorial wall. where we encourage people who are attending the event to bring a photo of the person who's died by suicide, and they can put it on the wall, and then they can, it gives them time to have that personal reflection. But also, again, it's so that people can see how many people are affected by suicide. It's quite frightening, the numbers of people. When you're thinking that there's about 6,500 suicides a year in England and Wales. And the figures of people suggesting how many are affected by a suicide. I was at a conference recently, and there was an American speaker there, and they said there's up to 130 people affected by each suicide. So 130 times 6,000 is a huge number, and that's every year. These people are affected by suicide. So we have the memorial wall at the event, and then we'll have a short introduction from local councillors, possibly an MP, to explain why it's so important to have the event. And then a religious person will say a few words. And then what we try and do, we try and get people who have been affected by suicide to give us what they want to talk to directly. So we've had a number of people from SOBS, and SOBS is Survivors of Bereavement by Suicide, and they're a national charity working with people affected by suicide. And we always like to give them a platform because the work they do is so vital in the long-term rehabilitation, as it were, of the individuals. So they'll tell us their stories, and then we usually arrange for other people to come and tell their stories. We've had Danny Sculthorpe, ex-Wigan player.
Careful, you got to get that right.
Got to get that right. He spoke at St Helens. Now, he had a very close friend who was a player who took their own life, and then he had an awful pre-season injury a number of years ago that wiped him out of the game. And he was close to suicide himself, very strong suicidal ideation. And he tells his story as well. And it's very moving, I think, that if you've got, someone famous, it demonstrates it affects anyone. There's no barrier to who it can affect from, any backgrounds. Whilst we see statistically you're more likely in a deprived community, that doesn't mean it's only people from deprived communities that will go and take their own lives. So I think it's important that people can see that it's a leveller, really, and we're all in this sort of situation together, and we can do what we can together to ensure we can move things forward. And then there's a time of personal reflection where I think we've got a singer who will sing some songs and set the tone for people to have that real time to think about how things are going on. And then we try and lift it a bit more at the end, because whilst it is always be a sombre occasion, we try and make it as uplifting and meaningful for the people who attend as possible.
With that in mind, you talked a lot about, eyes to the front, personal reflection as well. Presumably when people come together with having had the shared experiences, that in a business world, they call it networking. As people turn to the person next to them and start talking to other people. I imagine there's great value in that, where you suddenly get a sense that within a room or within a space, there are a series of people, actually, if they turn and open up to the person next to them, they can in turn open to the person next to them. You can have that sort of community spirit.
I was just about to say, this community is the key to this, because they all live in a local community. And again, it's the thought that it's not just happening to me. I think that's really important, because when someone is directly affected by suicide, there's lots of questions that they'll ask themselves. Why me? What if? What could I have done? A whole range of things. And I must say that when I watched the Coronation Street suicide stories recently, I thought that was very well done, because they try to demonstrate the different sort of perspectives that people affected by suicide can take. And I think that's a really important thing that you can share, and it becomes a community event.
We often talk about the stigma and try to break down that stigma in regard to mental health. Is there a stigma from losing someone to suicide?
I think the person who's lost someone will feel stigmatised. They almost ashamed, and it's a really sad position for them to feel ashamed when they're actually grieving for something that wasn't an accident, and there was something potentially could have been done to stop the suicide, because they're all, I think they're all resolvable situations that people are in, and their emotions have taken them too far, and that's generally why people will move on. So to take away some of that questioning from the individual gives them more time through the grieving process.
Because that sense of, if it is guilt that they feel for the wrong reason, because, they weren't able to do something, and they wouldn't have been able to do something based on the fact that person had made maybe a decision. If things had been different, maybe the situation would have been different. But to have to deal with that mindset while also dealing with the grief.
Yes.
While also dealing with the idea that somebody from outside might be looking at them thinking, well, I don't now know how to speak to this person because they've had an experience which is a terrible experience, and now I'm going to say the wrong thing. So best that I actually cross the road and don't say anything to them at all.
Yeah, that saying the wrong things is a really important thing. That an issue that we try and we do a lot of training courses for people, and we don't just train medical professionals. We try and train anyone who's going to come into contact with anyone who potentially could be suicidal. From hairdressers to taxi drivers to restaurateurs to people in the corner shop, and it's about training people to give them the emotional resilience to have a conversation and not be scared to talk about suicide with someone. There's a common myth that talking about it increases suicide rates, which is, ludicrous, really. I mean, it's the process of talking about it that can reduce suicide rates, not the other way around. So that's an important part. And you touched on the stigma of mental health. Well, it's all the way through from the mental health situation and suicide. It shouldn't be stigmatised. These are painful situations that people are going through, and they don't need to be judged. And maybe that feeling that they are being judged is from within. And if they have the opportunity to talk to people, then they'll find that there's like-minded people who've been through the similar situations. And that's why we think SOBS is a really important service to people who've been affected by suicide, and why we try and link into our memorials the work of SOBS.
Richard Brown is with us on Radio City Talk. This is an event which is taking place at the Halton Stadium tomorrow night. That's Wednesday. Starts at 7 p.m. Runs till around about 9 o'clock. And it's all part of the Amparo service, which has been running across Merseyside, Cheshire for over 3 years now, reducing stigma, supporting bereaved families and bringing local services together. Can people just show up?
Yes, just turn up on the day. We will be taking a register of sorts, but that's just so we know that if there's people who want additional support, we've got their contact details. But yeah, just turn up. We're more than happy to see anyone who wants to be there.
There's new figures that are out today, actually, and the UK male suicide rate is at its lowest level on record, according to new figures. A total of 5,821 were registered last year, down from 5,965 in 2016. For some, that will, of course, be a cause for celebration, that there are more people alive now than there were the year before. 5,821 suicides, though, is still a very high number, isn't it?
It's huge. I mean, I was driving along recently and I heard an advert for carbon monoxide poisoning, and not to advertise for it, but to get sensors for the home. And I thought, that's really interesting that I think the government bodies are actually trying to prevent carbon monoxide poisoning in the home. So I thought, how many people actually die? And it's about half the rate of suicides. And I'm thinking, well, if they put in a lot of energy into stopping people dying from carbon monoxide poisoning, why can't we do the same for suicide? That's 5,000 plus deaths that are completely unnecessary.
Yeah, there's some strength. And when you look at the numbers, it's strange, isn't it? If you're between the ages of 18 and 49, the most likely person to kill you is yourself. That's outside of being hit by a bus or being involved in a train accident or being involved in a plane crash or anything like that. That you yourself are the biggest threat to yourself as well.
Yeah, it's quite a leveler, that statistic. I mean, and what I think is even worse is as bad as it can be, is when you're seeing the suicides of the 10 to 18-year-old age group, and that's, yes, the point of you're the biggest risk to yourself in that age category. But for younger people, it's, life's just beginning, and then you feel that you've got no one to talk to and no way of moving away from what you think is the best solution. And I find that really hard to work with. And we see that once you have one suicide in a school environment, it can trigger others. And that's why we try and get into the schools really quickly to kind of to give the pupils the chance to talk to people.
Do you think that's why as well, we've seen the figures drop there to its lowest levels on record, but it's also a good reason to have that zero suicide as a target.
An ambition, yes.
Have that as the ultimate ambition.
Yeah, absolutely.
There are no suicides.
And Liverpool, Merseyside and Cheshire Champs organisation are doing a huge amount of work to to realise a zero suicide ambition. It's quite a challenge, as you can imagine. How do you get to people of high risk groups when we've mentioned earlier that suicide can happen to anyone? So it is quite a challenge to get to a zero suicide ambition. But you've seen some excellent work all around the country and internationally as well. I mean, the model that we use is basically taken from the model that's used in Derry in Ireland. And I spoke to the chap who set it up there, and he said, oh, well, yeah, we just took the model from Louisiana. And Louisiana took the model from New Zealand or Australia. So best practices shared around the world at the moment to enable all communities to have a zero suicide ambition.
The event takes place tomorrow. That's at the Halton Stadium. That's Wednesday night, 7 p.m. until 9 p.m. Richard Brown, our guest in the studio, thank you for your time as well. I know you had lots of support from this one, Halton Council.
Exactly.
Obviously, the stadium itself as well.
I mean, we can't do these events without working with the local authority in the area and the venue, because unfortunately, we don't have budgets for this kind of thing. It's Mental Health Extra. Brilliant to get Richard Brown on the programme. We thank you to everybody who's involved in that, and the Listening Ears and Amparo Service as well, doing fantastic work across Merseyside and Cheshire. I've received an email from the family of Nathan Wilson, and we've got details of an event which is taking place in Nathan's name. And Nathan's story has been told on Mental Health Monday in the past. All the previous editions, by the way, of Mental Health Monday are available to listen to. There is a 10K and 5K race being run, all in support of Papyrus, who work very, very hard to prevent young suicide. It's taking place at Crosby Leisure Centre, and it's taking place on the 9th of September. It starts at 10 a.m, and if you want to be involved, you can be in either the 10K or the 5K race. There's going to be trophies for the fastest 3 men and women. And although, of course, a very serious subject matter with the work of prevention of suicide, it's going to be a fun day. There's loads of stuff there for the kids, goodie bags, a day of raffles, including a signed Liverpool squad shirt, a signed Everton football, a signed Jamie Carragher shirt with a signed photo of John Barnes given by Phil Carragher. There's also a match ticket for a family of 4 from Marine FC, as well as a host of other prizes as well. You can just Google the event, Nathan's 10K or 5K. Loads of information there as well. Plus, there's fundraising for Papyrus, which is taking place through Just Giving as well. Last year, there were more than 75 runners, more than 45 walkers as well. They raised about £7,000. They're hoping to do even more this year as well. So support Nathan's 5K and 10K taking place on the 9th of September. All the information across social media. Plus, there's a fundraising page for Papyrus in the name of Leonard Wilson. Support that if you can, and more than happy to give it a plug here on Mental Health Extra from Radio City Talk.
Mental Health Monday with Mick Coyle
on Radio City Talk.